Hello and welcome to Vital Signs. I'm Brendon Fallon. Bipolar disorder is marked by more premature death than other mental health disorders, like major depression. This is not surprising considering its endless cycling of mania with its hallmarks of feeling euphoric, spending extravagantly, and acting recklessly. This all followed by the slump into a sad and hopeless depression that may be laced with thoughts of suicide. You can imagine the toll this takes on a person's body and mind. Bipolar has also long posed an unsolvable mystery to scientists, grappling with the questions of what causes it, why mood shifts happen, and what can bring stability. Riddles unsolvable until perhaps now, and through the recent discoveries of today's guest, Dr. William J. Walsh. His decades of research into the biochemical causes of mental illness have yielded treatments for ADHD, depression, and other disorders that are now used around the world. For part one of Bipolar Unlocked, Dr. Walsh takes us into the intricate workings of our genes and brain cells to where he's discovered the very spark of bipolar to lie. And from there he reveals what might be done to douse the flames. Dr. Walsh is an internationally recognized expert in the field of nutritional medicine. Over 1,000 physicians and medical practitioners have been trained in his targeted nutrient therapy approach since 2000. Dr. Walsh, it's a pleasure to have you join us on Vital Signs again.
Well, good to be with you again, Brendon.
And I'm really excited to go further into this topic of your book with you, The Essence of Bipolar Disorder. And to start with, you've done so much research, you've contributed so much to this field in terms of helping people to manage their mental health problems, particularly with major depression. I'm interested to know why you've particularly focused on bipolar disorder. You've spent 8 years researching this, and why now you've taken this focus?
Well, the reason is that I founded the Carl Pfeiffer Treatment Center, the Pfeiffer Treatment Center, many years ago. And we saw more than 30,000 patients, 3,600 of schizophrenia, more than 1,500 bipolar patients, and a lot of behavior disorders, ADHD, autism, and we have some of the world's biggest databases for these conditions. And the one thing that has bothered me through all of this is we had developed treatments and the understanding of behavior disorder, the causes of it, and ADHD, and then of course depression, where we discovered there are 5 completely different phenotypes. And the problem is that we had more than 1,500 bipolar patients, and it was really difficult to help them. Nobody knew the cause. And so what they've learned is that it's now clear to neuroscientists and geneticists that bipolar has a very strong genetic predisposition. Something has gone wrong before birth that predisposes to this condition. And we've now known for a long time of all the mental illnesses, major depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, bipolar is the most heritable of all of them. It runs more closely in families than any other disease. However, it doesn't appear in adolescence until usually, the median age of onset is age 25. So it takes a long time before onset. So what could possibly cause that? And that's been a mystery really for 100 years. 2 major questions. Why did it take so long to have the onset? And then secondly, once they have the onset, why this mysterious switching between mania and depression? So that's why I decided to spend 6 months studying recent advances in genetics and in neuroscience, looking for clues to what are the mechanisms and what's really going on in the brain. And that led to more than 8 years study. That it started as a 6-month investigation, and I think we have actually discovered quite a bit. We've discovered, number one, we found the cause of bipolar disorder, the genetic predispositions. At least the study has evidence for that. And I think the world needs to know that. And this led directly to an explanation for why bipolar patients cycle between mania and depression.
I look forward to getting deeper into this with you, Dr. Walsh. These aspects, really the cause of bipolar, which is tremendously promising if we've tapped into that. Just going back a little bit, you were talking about like the recent developments in genetic understanding that prompted you to some degree to take this path. Can you sum that up in a nutshell? What are those recent developments?
Well, there are maybe two or three major developments. Number one was the realization that virtually every bipolar patient has extraordinary free radical assault on their brains and on their specifically their DNA, and it causes gradual new mutations and it took really typically about 20 years from onset when you have the genetic predispositions that you had to have this accumulated damage before you would get the onset of the disease. That was one thing. And the big surprise for 30 years was that we know that bipolar is a very heritable disease. It runs in families stronger than any other mental disorder. Nobody could even find a single gene related to it. But starting in 2006, we've begun to learn and identify some of these variants, some of the pro-bipolar genetic mutations. And there may be more than 1,000 of them. And eventually we got to the point of 64 known low effect variants associated with bipolar.
And given that was the extent of understanding that genetic science had reached by that point that you started your research, can I ask what your further analysis then involved?
What I did is it was through that analysis of those 64 genes, I did a special analysis that got rid of genes that were obscuring the true bipolar genes. I call it an exclusion analysis. And when I completed the analysis and I found the genes that appeared to be true bipolar genes, and sure enough, nearly all of them are major ion channel genes. When I stripped everything away, 75% of them were DNA damage genes, major cancer genes, etc. And that's how we found out, and to my surprise, total surprise, is that is essential part of bipolar. It has two coincident factors. One is the ion channel weakness, which could gradually get worse and worse, but the accelerated DNA damage. So then there's a lot of data on, see, if you have accelerated DNA damage, you're going to be a person that's going to be sick, more likely to have cancer and kidney disease. DNA damage is the cause of most of these late onset physical disorders.
And I know in the process that you're describing, this ion channel dysregulation, this is really central to that process. And I wonder, what is the interplay between ion channels and these neurotransmitters, these chemical messengers like serotonin and dopamine? I know these are often referred to as the feel-good hormones, and these are responsible. They play a role in people's mood, and I imagine also in bipolar disorder. So what is the interplay between these ion channels that become dysregulated and neurotransmitters?
Yeah, if a person studies neuroscience and they want to learn why, the question really is what causes a neuron to fire? What causes neurotransmitters to be into a synapse? And what really controls it more than anything are ion channels. The ion channels embedded in the membranes of your neurons. And there are four major ion channel types. It's a very complex situation, and it's all regulated. And all of these ion channels are produced by genetic expression. There are genes for these ion channels, and that's they're in your brain because of genetic expression. But sometimes that people have mutations or that system, that expression is not working quite well. Ion channels are in the membranes of your neurons. Your 80,000 neurons in our brain, which we have, and that's what is doing the crosstalk and the functioning of the brain. And basically, they one important thing is that your neurons have a voltage. And they have a gradient between potassium, which is high concentration inside the neuron, and sodium ions that are outside the neurons. They're what they call leak channels that are always open. And that causes the neuron to develop a voltage or a potential. The neuron won't fire until that voltage gets to a triggering point. Without that, we wouldn't be alive. The brain wouldn't work. And so the ion channels are responsible for the ability to actually have a neuron fire. It's central to the whole business of neurotransmission and brain function.
So this potential you mentioned, it builds up, and this voltage builds up, and that's what fires the neuron.
Well, you get a resting potential. What happens is wonderful, that you're almost all of your 80 billion neurons, these tiny little neurons, almost all of them have the same potential of, it's something like 70 millivolts and microvolts. And anyway, that potential, that instability, because of the different gradients, the different level of these ions inside and outside the neuron, that's what enables a neuron to fire. And that's what enables the brain to communicate, the neurons to communicate with each other, and for our brains to work. It's all related.
Speaking about lithium, I can't help thinking of the example of the actor Richard Dreyfuss, who spoke about his experience of bipolar in that documentary, The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive. And he talks about his kind of these catastrophes that kept happening, I guess, as the onset of bipolar was happening for him, how he had a car accident, which was in the papers. I think his marriage may have broken down around that time. He was involved in conflicts constantly with people who were finding him, as he puts it, off-putting. Let's take a look at that now, and this is where he describes the effect that lithium had when he started to take that.
With lithium, I remember driving down Mulholland Drive one night, and all of a sudden, I was aware, after 10 days of taking it, that I had letterboxed, that I could feel this. It was an absolutely non-claustrophobic experience that took the top and bottom and said you could live here. And I was very happy to do so. I married with it. I had children by it. Reclaimed a career, if you want to put it that way.
So for Richard Dreyfuss, lithium seemed to simplify his thought activity and also seemed to take the edge of his symptoms in general. So I wonder, generally speaking, with lithium, is the workings of this drug, did it give some lead to you in your investigation to discovering what is causing bipolar and how it might be better treated?
Yeah, and there have been hundreds, and in fact, I think thousands of careful scientific studies trying to understand why lithium helps some people and why it fails to help others. And there are, in my book, I list 11 theories to why lithium might work. And looking at all of them, there's a couple that I think are the most likely, but still no one knows why it works. And it was all discovered by complete total accident in the 1950s in Australia. I met one of the richest people in the world who came to us for bipolar, and he was a brilliant business person. He had enormous amounts of money, and he was a wonderful guy. He was really a caring, wonderful guy. But he told me that he couldn't live any longer. He was constantly wanting to kill himself because he couldn't stand it any longer, the pain and the misery of it, even though he was so successful. And he told me that he had taken lithium and he got better. He was thrilled he got better, except that lithium has, on some people, has the problem of causing liver damage and kidney damage. For him, kidney damage. And his doctor told him that if he continued his lithium, he would die of either kidney or liver damage. So he had to stop. So when I saw him, he had been fine for some time, but now he is no longer able to take it. Now, there are some people who can take lithium, and it seems to help them in the beginning really nicely. But then as time goes on, the effectiveness of the lithium fades away, and they run into trouble too. And the reason is that the continuing damage to their brain and to their DNA because of the continuing accelerated assault on their DNA and the new mutations that are formed, the condition just gradually gets worse and worse and more complex. And so lithium is wonderful, especially for a while in a lot of people. They're the lucky ones. That's the first thing that we recommend is that if a person gets diagnosed, try lithium. This might really, really help them, at least for a while. And hopefully they won't, but you have to keep track of whether it's going to destroy their liver or kidney.
What is lithium doing beyond the standard drug therapies that makes it effective in these particular cases?
Well, lithium's a ion. It's one of the major ions. And the lithium in a person's brain, you have all these neurons, these 80 billion neurons that are causing the interactions and the neurotransmissions, and they're outside the neurons. So when a neuron fires, when it reaches a point where it will fire, which is happening constantly in the brain, what happens is that some of your ion channels open, and the potassium ions that are outside, 20 times more of potassium ions outside than inside. I'm sorry, sodium ions outside. I just said that. And the sodium ions suddenly rush into the neuron. And that's part of what's going on, and that's why you get neurotransmitters ejected into a synapse. Well, lithium is out there also, and it also tends to go through the same ion channels, and they compete. One of the theories, I think one of the most promising ones, is that the lithium competes with the sodium ions trying to rush into the neuron to initiate cell firing. And so I think that is one likely possibility. There are two others that are quite likely, and a total of, I think, 11 of them theories that are plausible, but no one knows yet what the real reason is. After all of this research over all of these years, we still don't know. But it's still the treatment of choice throughout the world. When somebody if someone in Russia or London or someplace gets diagnosed with bipolar, most psychiatrists will start and try lithium, hoping that they'll be one of the lucky ones that will respond.
So even in the effectiveness of lithium, potentially there's a connection to the operation of these ion channels. And to take it back to the central cause that you've found, that you've identified as laid out in your book, the dysregulated ion channels and the accelerated DNA damage, I wonder, are these factors that are affecting a person right from the time that they're born all the way until when they finally develop to the onset of the bipolar condition?
It develops the day you're born. It starts the day you're born. And some people are prone to bipolar disorder, and they're the ones who happen to have mutations in their ion channel genes. That's what we discovered. And a very important piece of bipolar is this accelerated DNA damage, which means changing the gene expressions. The DNA damage, what it really does is our DNA enables 80,000 important proteins to be produced all day, every day in our bodies. I call it the genetic restaurant. And that's why people age, is that with time, that gets it changes with time, because you get the DNA damage causes these 80,000 important proteins to be altered, and that's why we develop wrinkles when we get old. It's also the reason why late onset diseases cause, including cancer. And every human being has severe assault on their DNA every day, and we have genetic protections that are DNA repair, which is really an amazing thing, amazing understanding now. And also we have genetic protectors against free radicals. And we know what they are now, but some people have mutations, and these functions don't work. But we all have genetic imperfections, and it's varies from each person. And I think that it's just a matter of time before the genetic research improves and advances, we'll be able to take a newborn child and identify what their weaknesses are. We'll be able to identify people who are prone to bipolar. You've got a window of 25 years or, until it develops. And if you can simply slow down the DNA damage with special antioxidant therapies, you may be able to prevent it.
In a moment, Dr. Walsh will reveal some powerful antioxidants that could serve to prevent bipolar. Of course, antioxidants are molecules that counter oxidative stress in our bodies, which is a process comparable to the browning of an apple. A certain enzyme is released when an apple is cut open, reacts with oxygen in the air, causing phenolic compounds in the apple to change and release the brown pigment, which impacts the fruit's taste, texture, and nutritional value. Similarly, free radicals, which are oxygen-containing molecules, can damage our cell's DNA through oxidative stress. A free radical is a molecule with one or more unpaired electrons, so it's unstable. Like all of us, it wants stability in its life, so it's looking to score one or more electrons to balance itself out, which isn't a problem if there are enough antioxidants around. Antioxidants are happy to pass on electrons to free radicals. It's a win-win situation. But when there's not enough antioxidants, things can get ugly. That free radical, desperate to get stable, could steal an electron from an unsuspecting molecule. It could take it from a strand of your DNA and change or damage that strand's structure. In a moment, we'll hear about some key sources of oxidative assault that lead to bipolar and ways of dealing with those. But first, here's a look at my earlier talk with Dr. Ronnie Bannock on naturally treating migraine, dry eyes, and light sensitivity.
Migraine is a significant part of what I do as a neuro-ophthalmologist because many people with migraine may come in with visual symptoms. I myself am a migraine sufferer, and I ended up with chronic daily migraines. I was prescribed basically every migraine drug that was available by various different doctors, headache specialists in my area, and nothing was working. And not one of them had asked me, what are you eating? And how much caffeine do you have? And do you take any supplements? And it wasn't until I discovered the power of nutrition and lifestyle that I finally started to get better.
What was the core of your strategy for getting through that? Afterward, find the link to that video at the top of the comments and also in this video's description below. And subscribe for full access to our ever-expanding insight on fine-tuning your health. Just hit the big red button below. You offered a hopeful prediction in terms of preventing bipolar disorder by dealing with this oxidative assault that damages the DNA. You've talked about this. I wonder, what would you say are the main culprits? You've mentioned some of these that are causing this heavy oxidative assault that leads on to bipolar disorder.
Well, that's a great question because it's new and different. Up until 1970, we thought, and even beyond, even into past 2000, and many doctors who are nutritional or just people who are biochemists, we thought that really we knew what the master antioxidants were, and things like glutathione, catalase, zinc, selenium. We knew vitamin C. We have an army of terrific antioxidants, and we thought, wow, if a person has a problem with free radicals, we know how to do this. No. In I think it was 1963, somebody discovered the existence of something called superoxide. Well, superoxide is something that is formed in the body. Mitochondrial function is formed during immune function, is formed by cosmic rays, and it forms a family of three free radicals that those antioxidants don't touch. Vitamin C, glutathione, the things that we thought were, really able to really fix this. So our problem, and now if you look at the research recently in neuroscience on schizophrenia, bipolar, cancer, what they're finding is two things. They're finding excessive DNA damage. They're finding they're finding evidence of DNA that's extraordinarily damaged beyond normal. They're also finding the superoxide family of radicals, hydroxyl, ONOO, and superoxide itself. And we have genes that are supposed to regulate that. And we're finding that people with bipolar, that's not working. And what they're finding is they take large numbers of people with bipolar and they find, wow, their oxidative overload is extraordinary, and it's mostly superoxide radicals. So we have to do something called a dismutase effect on them. And we have 3 dismutase genes that are supposed to do this for us. And for people with bipolar and a lot of these other disorders, it's not working well. And that's what's attacking their DNA. That's what's making their bodies age faster. It's what's causing cancer more likely to develop, and heart disease and everything else. So that's a great question. It's not what we thought. We need some more research. We need some more. We need to get better therapies to do that, and I think they're going to be coming rather quickly.
And you mentioned cosmic radiation as a source of these superoxides. Well, are there other major sources?
Yeah, the 2 major sources in the brain. Number one are what I just said, the superoxide, and the other is what's called the Fenton reaction. And the Fenton reaction is a reaction with hydrogen peroxide, which is throughout the body, and hydrogen peroxide is something that we're really great at deactivating with antioxidants. But we now know exactly how it's formed. The question is how to minimize that formation and how to cope with it, how to rectify it. That's the term they use, is to rectify it. And it's a 1-2 punch. You have to give a treatment that'll take the superoxide family and get it down to hydrogen peroxide, and then we know how to fix that. And that's something that scientists know about. It hasn't quite. It's starting to reach commercial development, and you can go to a health food store now and you can buy superoxide. It's just that it does not working quite as well as it should yet, because it's hard to get it into the bloodstream, and its half-life in the bloodstream is very short. So we need to improve that, but that's coming. That we'll have that, I think, in 10, 15 years.
You can buy superoxide in like a nutrient store?
Yeah, there's 3 kinds. There's 3 genes. One of them is copper, zinc, superoxide 1. That's one of the genes.
But these are the dismutase, is that correct? Then this isn't the superoxide, this is the dismutase that counters the superoxide, is that?
That's right. These are dismutase genes. They're genes that dismutate, that do this job of converting the superoxide family down to the easily dealt with hydrogen peroxide. There are 3 genes that do that. It's really neat. One, superoxide 1, the copper zinc superoxide dismutase, what it does is it operates inside the neuron. And then the superoxide 2, which has got manganese, not copper and zinc, that functions within the mitochondria, which is great because that's where the lion's share of these superoxides are formed. And then number 3 is everything outside the neuron. So it's a great system. We have genetic protection throughout the brain, if only it worked well in most people.
And on a ground level, what kind of results have we seen? Are there any results coming through from applying these kinds of therapies to people with bipolar? Are there any anecdotal examples you have, Dr. Walsh?
I do, and they're by the way in chapter 12 of my book. I think I've shown where we are at this point. There's pretty clear evidence, especially out of research groups in Australia, that show that N-acetylcysteine, one of our favorite antioxidants, that it has the ability to help people with bipolar, and it has the ability to somewhat reduce the impact of the superoxide. We know that there's a series of 4 genes called methylation genes, which has been, and we now have therapies for promoting expression of methylation. That's probably the most powerful antioxidant. It's 300 times more powerful than glutathione, which we thought was the best of all. And it has shown evidence that if we can increase methylation, and there are some nutritional approaches for doing that can help. We've also learned that because these 2 or 3 genes that do this require copper and zinc to be normalized, if a person has a copper-zinc imbalance, there's now data showing that that's another reason why we're being assaulted by these especially nasty free radicals. So we know a little bit, and there are things we can start to do, but it's going to get better.
And that certainly paints a hopeful picture for the future of people dealing with this disorder. And I know you've had significant success with treatments you've developed for depression, for example, through advanced nutrient therapy, really focused on misbehaving neurotransmitters. We did a great interview on that, and I'll direct viewers. Viewers can find the link to that in the description below if they're interested in seeing that afterward. I wonder if a similar approach is used for a bipolar disorder, for example, dealing with the superoxide effect. What kind of results would you expect to see? Would we see an offset of the symptoms, like a decrease in the switching from mania to depression?
We haven't started yet. This is all so new, and the world doesn't know this yet. So the answer is that we have to take the data. We have to see whether we have to find out whether this helps them, and we won't know until we look at 1,000 people, maybe compare them with 1,000 people who didn't do this. And for one thing, we can determine whether we fix their DNA damage rates. We can do that now with lab testing. And we can also, the scientists can determine whether or not we've reduced not only the oxidative overload in their brain, which harms these people too, but the inflammation in the brain. We can right away, if you fix the superoxide problem, you'll greatly reduce inflammation, and that's part of their symptoms. So we can help them somewhat. But the short answer to your question is we haven't done this yet with bipolar patients, and we're about to begin. And we're gonna track the ones that we see, but there's no data yet.
So watch this space. It'll be exciting to see the response to the book and how this model is put into practice and see the results of that.
And I think some people are doing it, like the scientist Michael Burke and his colleagues in Australia. They're the ones who discovered N-acetylcysteine. My guess is they're already starting to get data on the degree to which that helps bipolar. Some of this is already going on.
I hear about N-acetylcysteine so much. I've only had one doctor who kind of raised a concern about it, and he's a cardiologist. He says about N-acetylcysteine that it's prescribed in many cases because it can improve brain function. It has these brain protective effects. But he says it kind of wipes out the mucosal barrier in the gut. And that this is a concern because it can lead to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and issues like this. I was wondering if you've heard anything on that front.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really important. We know that N-acetylcysteine can dramatically help some people and can dramatically harm others. For example, N-acetylcysteine will lower activity at NMDA. And that's really important if you got somebody with OCD, with certain neurotransmitter problems, but it'll make other people dramatically worse. So it's individual. You have to find you cannot just blindly give people N-acetylcysteine. We wouldn't think of that. We'd have to first check out and make sure you're not doing harm, because you could dramatically help some people with it, and you could dramatically harm them. And it's got to be. I've got page 3 of my book talks about how please do not try to treat yourself with information in this book. It needs to be done by a knowledgeable physician, really.
If you or a loved one is dealing with bipolar, Dr. Walsh has some advice you're going to want to hear coming up next. First, though, how could nutritional medicine take the edge off bipolar? And what causes bipolar's drastic mood shifts? Here's a quick look at Bipolar Unlocked, Part 2, coming very soon.
I've seen 1,500 bipolar cases, and it's amazing how a few of maybe 5% of them do so extraordinarily well. I've had billionaires, captains of industry, symphony conductors, a couple Miss Americas, Hollywood actors, great athletes. The possibility of excellence in business, in art, or science, athletics is still there. So one of the big clues for me was it doesn't affect the entire brain. And that pointed to serotonin.
At your time of viewing this, that video may already be published. You can check the top of the comments and also the description below to to see if a link to it has been added there. And to get notice of new Vital Signs videos, follow me at Vital Signs Brendon on Instagram and at C Vital Signs on X. For someone who may be dealing with bipolar themselves or has a loved one dealing with that, is there some way just at this stage that they could apply this knowledge, or where would they begin to start?
I would suggest they go to their doctor and make sure that he understands how important it is to have better protection, antioxidant protection, and that in fact we now have the ability to do a lab test to determine if you've got accelerated DNA damage. And it's both a urine and a blood test. And the reason is that you've got so much DNA in your body that it tends, in the vulnerable part of your DNA, there's 4 nucleotides in your DNA. One of them is guanine. That's the vulnerable one. And that's the one that tends to get oxidized or harmed by free radicals. It shows up, there's so much of it, it shows up in our urine. We now can do a lab test of someone and determine whether or not they've got a problem of rapid accelerated damage, or if they're in good shape and normal. So they could, I guess, if I had someone in my family or a relative or friend, I would urge them to talk to their doctor about this and run this test. And they'll probably flunk it if they've got bipolar. And then there are things that the doctor could recommend that would really help to some degree. It could at least shut off the continual worsening that happens year after year with bipolar. They can sort of stop it in its tracks, at least to the point where it is at that point in our life. And if you could do this with someone who might be 22 years old, who might be ill and been ill for 6 months, they're the ones who tend, I think every doctor who works with bipolar, has got cases of young people who responded really well to treatment. The problem is that very same person, 20 years later, will have a much more complex, difficult disease because of the continuing DNA damage, making their condition worse. They can do them a lot of good. So I would suggest they would do that.
And if they were to find a doctor that's part of your network who's had training under your system, they'd be able to access certain other tests to determine if they're deficient in specific nutrients. Is that something that would be helpful for bipolar?
They would know how to normalize copper and zinc. We now have more than 1,200 doctors throughout the world, and it's growing. We're training doctors. We've been training doctors again this spring, first-time doctors, and it's just a process that if once they've finished with our 5-webinar session that takes like a month, but we do it virtually, that they can actually do these treatments the day that we complete our program. And but I think they're pretty much scattered throughout. They're in 85 countries now. My original goal was to train 1,000 doctors. We're now working on the second 1,000. And I keep hearing wonderful things about what they're doing. Our most enthusiastic doctors are psychiatrists. It's hard being a psychiatrist. If some terribly ill person comes in, insurance might only allow you half an hour or 45 minutes, and you spend all your time wondering, I wonder what drug I should give them. I mean, that's not why they went to medical school, I don't think. And there's so many that are disillusioned, and they love the ability to do some lab tests and get a good idea of which neurotransmitters are abnormal. And they'll learn some treatments that at least provide some benefit, and in some cases, great benefit. What they do with our treatment is that we insist they keep, most of these people are on heavy duty medications. We insist they stay on the medication and do our treatment, do both together, and wait until they get better or somewhat better, and only then try weaning and reducing the doses. And that's sort of the way it all works, and it's all done very safely. And anyway, I think this is what I would recommend. But originally, I think it would be good for every doctor. I'm hoping that when our book comes out on October 21, I would like the news to get out. Maybe we'll get their attention by talking about finding the cause of bipolar, which of course will be debated and will be investigated and whatever, which is what should happen. But I want every psychiatrist, or I like the word to spread, that you really ought to check and see whether or not they're having excessive DNA damage, excessive oxidative assault that is causing the illness to get worse and worse and worse. because that they could fix.
And that being a very hopeful and optimistic prospect for people dealing with this condition. Dr. Walsh, thank you so much for coming on Vital Signs and shedding light on the causes of bipolar disorder. And I look forward to having you on again very soon to go further into what your investigation has revealed, particularly about what's causing the switching mechanism from mania to depression in this condition. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
So it's two coinciding factors, weakness of the ion channels and accelerated DNA damage, which plant the seed of bipolar disorder, based on Dr. Walsh's model. It's on the DNA damage front that the strongest potential lies to prevent or cut down the symptoms of bipolar. For example, through powerful antioxidants like superoxide dismutase. Tune into Bipolar Unlocked Part 2, coming very soon, and probing further treatment paths like medications and identifying the mystery neurotransmitter central to the switch from mania to depression. Why does this switching happen? Find out in Bipolar Unlocked Part 2. Check the top of the comments or this video's description to see if that's already been published. The link to relieve migraine, dry eyes, and light sensitivity is also there, as is the link to Dr. Walsh's just-released book, The Essence of Bipolar Disorder, explaining these concepts in elegant detail. With that said, it's been great to be with you. I'm Brendon Fallon, and this is Vital Signs.